So
All right.
and I've never done this before, so I leave it to you to start it off with.
Yep. Sure. So normally what I do is I will have you, it'll be very different once we get past the baseline. We'll talk more about each of the in-task standards, but this week I usually just do a general conversation of how things went. So if you want to go ahead and just reflect on how it was your first time, recording a lesson, the editing and how you think it went overall, and then I'll give you my feedback.
Okay. Um, so yeah, so so I picked my class as the digital film class, um, mainly because they're one of the few programs that I teach where we can actually get to the end of a lesson in a 45, 60-minute period of time. Uh, and so one of the things is that they also kind of share like my personality as far as teaching and education. So that's why when we were filming these videos, like I wanted to do like certain editing things, like with the coins and the sounds and the animation, and so the teacher, the program instructor was very good at teaching me Adobe Premiere. So he kind of did his own lesson of like a I do, we do, you do. So by the end of the week, I was already like cutting my own things, and so the lifelong learning continues with me, not only as a teacher but learning some new skills. But one of the things that I really liked about the class is that we get into a lot of really great discussions. And in my reflection, it is both a blessing and a curse that we do that. So with some of these students, they're coming from a place of, sometimes broken homes. Um, Sometimes, there's poverty. There, so that's why I wanted to showcase at the very beginning them eating snacks in class, because sometimes like that might be a long period between lunch and when they might eat dinner. So to create an environment where they can feel comfortable. And so yeah, I just like I in the curse of that kind of discussion process is that they feel comfortable to talk a lot, and and sort of my guiding questions go into different places. But that also, I guess, like my own self criticism in both my reflection that I posted, but for and also with you, is that I also allow sometimes the class to get off the rails a little bit with that discussion, and we couldn't finish my class or the class in time. So we had to. So I shot some extra footage in the next class where they were working collaboratively and going over the worksheet, and then the end of discussion, because that beginning discussion before we got into sort of the content went way longer than I had planned out, and that was not by any means their fault. That was my fault, and something that I need to continue to work with. Um, so I really love the discussions. Uh, and I don't know if you noticed in the video, but like some students were caught like glancing at the camera. And so even though they're digital film students, like it's still kind of like they're on camera this time, not they're not the ones filming. So kind of getting that out of the way, that this is going to be a process for the next 5 videos. I like the fact that even though we were filming, that students felt comfortable being themselves. So it's like when we were getting into the scavenger hunt for the bias in the media, the students were very comfortable saying like, "Hey, we want to go to the academic center," and then I gave them physical copies instead of working online. And so I think for those 3 students in particular, that will be something that's a very common theme in the preceding classes. And then also sort of going to your comment on the lesson plan with grouping them homogeneously, is that there are certain students who are on plans but refuse to go to the academic center because there's sort of like a stigma associated with like, if other students see me going in there for help, they're going to know that like I'm suffering from some sort of academic problem. But as I noted in the video, over 50% of the students are on some sort of IEP or 504 plan. So sometimes grouping them homogeneously is specifically because I know that they work well together, but the ones who need support also aren't afraid to go ask for support. So, but I think that maybe depending on how you view the goal setting for the next month, for the class, that maybe, breaking them up based on their vocabulary levels and stuff like that might be more beneficial. So overall, I thought the class was pretty good, but I think that there's definitely some room for improvement, and mostly on my end.
So thank you. And I liked how it was helpful for me to get that background information. So when the video first started, it was nice that you had in there. We had talked a little bit about your packet of students, but to kind of be able to have that refresh of the type of kids that were in the classroom, the level of need in the room, and all of that, I think is really, really important. So that's good. Your instructor will have that too. So first, I always start out with audio and camera angle just because it's really important. And you had like a whole crew going on in there. So those things were perfect. Your editing was great. I could hear the students, I could hear you, and the room is big. So at first I was like, okay, this is a large space. Hopefully I can hear everything, but I could, which is perfect. So I wouldn't change anything with where you had the cameras set, or anything like that. That was really great. So let's see. Lesson feedback, that was their lesson plan feedback. So it's good for me to kind of see it come to light and then also see how it looks and feels. So it makes sense. I can see now why you grouped the students the way you did, especially with the activity as it kind of unfolded. It did kind of fit with that. So that was good to see. Lesson intro was good. I like the fact that you start with checking in with your students, making sure that they're, giving that moment to kind of settle, ask them how their weekend was, comfortable classroom environment. You could tell that the students were probably less comfortable because of the camera, but that your environment is one where they will raise their hand and say, can I go to the dean? Can I go talk to, the counselor or whoever the other individual was, but that the one student in the beginning of the lesson wanted to go see. So that is really good that they feel comfortable raising their hand and saying, this is what I need, and I kind of need it right now. May I go? And they can go. The only one other thing that might be a good idea is if a student needs to go see somebody like a counselor, finding a way, if they're comfortable raising their hand and asking in front of the whole class, that's great. But also just making sure that you do have a way for students to kind of quietly let you know that they need something, but they're not comfortable requesting it verbally in front of the room, if that should make sense.
Sure, absolutely.
Let's see. Opener we talked about. I liked that you had them come up. You made the visual with all the words that the students came up with. I thought that was great. And then you reviewed ideas or different sources that they came up with. So right, they put their 5 in and then it filtered it so that it was unique as long as they, spelled it consistently. But I think it was good that you pushed back. Like Wikipedia was one that you talked about. Well, how do you know that it's not a good source, or how can you tell if it is, and what other information could we pull from it? So I thought that was really good that you let them drive, like that student-centered learning, right? Everybody always says, well, what does student-centered learning look like? And it doesn't necessarily mean that the teacher isn't doing the talking, but it's in response to what the student said. So it's a perfect example of saying to the students, okay, come up with your top 5, put them in here, and then let's take a look at collectively what we came up with as a class and have a conversation around some of those, right? So that's a perfect example of how we can let student voice lead our discussion, even if the teacher is going to be starting that conversation. So I think that was a really good way to do that, and also kind of give the students a minute in the beginning of the lesson to get started and get going. Let's see. The one thing you already talked about it in your reflection. I would agree that there are times when students are stopping your lesson. There was that female student on the right. I don't know if maybe she hasn't been in the class as long as the other students. It seemed like maybe that was the case.
I'm trying to, was it the one who came in a little late?
She came in late, but then she also, I don't think, had like the Google Classroom, or it seemed like I couldn't exactly pick up on that dialogue, but it seemed like maybe she wasn't added into the group.
Oh, so I think there was 2 occasions. One was, I think when I was sending and this was what I did in the beginning of the year, is I created a blanket Google Classroom for all students. So when I was individualizing certain activities, instead of putting it in the classroom because it sends a notification to all students, I had started to email students like links to certain things. And I think for one particular student, I sent the wrong email to the right first name, but the wrong last name. And then for the other student who came in late, she had not been she was absent for the other class. So there was a certain point when I said, we'll break out into your groups from last class. And she said like, I don't know who my group is. So there was that one instance with that student. So yeah, but I can't, I'm trying to think of if those are one of the two that you're
Yep. So
talking about.
that definitely is the two times. And then I think the one student also then jumped back in and started to kind of engage in conversation while you were talking with the student about, I think it was Wikipedia you were talking to him about at that point in time. I would just kind of reiterate to the students when an appropriate stopping point is, because nothing negative there was no negative impact to her in the moment with not being able to get into the Google Classroom. Right, like she could do what you guys were just engaging in conversation, you were introducing it. So obviously, yes, she needed to let you know that she wasn't in the Google Classroom, but trying to teach them that, listen, just wait until there's a break, and then like in my instruction, and then I'll help, because she kept kind of stopping you while you were talking, which kind of disrupted the flow a little bit, which not a huge negative, just something that when I was watching, it's like, okay, she needs to just wait. She's a high school age student. She realized the kids aren't doing anything. They're not in their groups yet. They're not completing the document. Just hold off and be a little mature and wait for him to stop teaching, and then say, oh, reminder, you know what I mean? I'm not in that Google Classroom.
Right. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. All right. And then the other recommendation I would make is getting your video a little bit closer. Again, the baseline is totally fine, but once we start filming for the physical and test standards, getting as close as you can to that 20-minute mark, so you can incorporate as much as you possibly can, to showcase your ability to implement each of those standards.
Okay. And
Yeah.
so a question on that is so for instance, this was just for standard one, and then I know that like, so it might be, I think the next one is for 2, 3, and 4, or just 2 and 3. But does that mean that you're also including the standard one? So it's like, this video is specifically looking for standard 2 and 3, but then we also have to include each previous standard as well.
No, so you'll go back to, so the second video you'll film is for standard 1, 2, and 3. So you do 1, 2 times basically. And then after that, you don't cycle back. So basically your first video is going to be standard 1, 2, and 3. Your next video will be 4 and 5. And then you'll do 6, 7, and 8. And then your final video is very much like the baseline, where we're just kind of watching to see overall growth. So you're not necessarily having to cycle back and put in all of the standards. The reason it's structured kind of the way it is that standard 1, 2, and 3 pretty much naturally occur in every lesson. So the only difference is you're not going to have to give the annotations for those standards, but we'll still see it. Like, I'm still going to be able to see that you have a positive classroom community. I'm still going to be able to read in your lesson plan that you're supporting students with different instructional techniques, that you have an opener in your objectives. I'm still going to hear and see all of it, but it's not going to be something that you have to annotate for your instructor or for me.
Okay. Great.
Yeah. And that was really all the feedback I had for that particular video. Again, it will be much more specific once we get into your standard 1, 2, and 3 video. I'll evaluate you on the standards, and I'll give feedback directed at the standards. But this one, I like to just kind of have a general conversation. Classroom setup was really good. I could see you, I could see the students. You obviously have the ability to get to all the students. When they were grouped, it looked good. So everything looked and felt right, which is good. And then the next video, again, will kind of target that feedback around each of those standards.
Okay, great. And so is that just the end for the baseline video, at least?
Yes. Yep.
Awesome. All right. And so then there's 2 other quick things. Just briefly. And so one is there is the activity 3 for Unit 1, where for the sort of the civics goals for the next, I guess, for the next month, and you kind of hit on some of those. But I was just wondering, like, so I guess one goal for myself is to pace myself in an appropriate way that we can get through all of the things that I have planned. The other thing, I guess, would be maybe like I guess like I'm creating a lesson plan based on what I think we would have to teach to meet all of the standards that setting for Vermont standards for 12th grade. But I realized that my classroom, not just for the one that I'm filming for the clinical, but also for every program, is very elastic because some students are taking more classes, like Community College of Vermont. So they're in like 11th or 12th grade, but they're already taking some college classes on top of their high school work. And there's also some students who are, for instance, seniors, but they're reading at like maybe a 5th or 6th grade reading level. So the the hard part is when I'm trying to think of accommodations and modifications to my lessons. Is I guess like I'm creating a lesson for a perfect world environment, but realizing that in my classroom setting that does not exist. Um, so so I was wondering, in your experience, like how do you sort of navigate that when like creating a lesson, and then maybe what kind of things should I look for as far as content and vocabulary for the next couple of videos, for the next month, where I can like set a goal and kind of like see where that progress is for their growth.
Sure. So I guess the answer to your first question is going to be very much what you're dictated to do by your district in regards to your lesson pacing and meeting the needs of your students. Because as far as we are concerned and with Moreland, we would want to see your lesson plan match the ability level of your students, right? That you were differentiating your instruction to support the students in the room. But obviously there's very much, sorry, that top down that we have to worry about, right? I teach in the state, or I work in the state of New York. There are learning standards that teachers have to hit, and there are assessments that all students have to take. So with that comes the necessity to plan and implement lessons that are on grade level to sometimes students that are not on grade level, just because of the fact that we're dictated to teach a set of standards and then assess those standards at the end of the year. But as far as we're concerned, we would like you to see your lesson plan, your differentiation meet the needs of the students in the room. A lot of that's where that data piece comes in. And so in your differentiation section, what I tell my candidates, talk about students by number right now. So for example, when you're talking about vocabulary and content, in your differentiation, you can put a student like student 2, this is what I'm going to do actually specifically for students 2, 3, and 4 based on the data that I've collected, because that kind of fits within that and meets the differentiation. I have told my candidates for that particular activity to keep it as simple as you can and connect it as directly to your classroom as you can. Sometimes that means that the vocabulary is going to shift. So most of my candidates right now are doing weekly vocabulary assessments with their students, whether they're English language learners and they're just learning new words, and then they're being assessed on how many new words that week they learned, or whether it be they're in science and have they mastered the 6 new key terms that we've learned that week. The following week, it might be 6 different key terms, but how are they progressing in understanding the importance of that content-specific vocabulary, and how does that measure out? So that's kind of, especially at the high school setting, an easy way to make it worthwhile, but also fit that particular activity. So if you look at your content, and if there are new vocabulary terms that your students need over a set period of time, and you just quickly assess them every time you have a data check, they're not going to be the same words repeated, but they're going to be the same number of words to allow you to determine in 1 week or in 2 weeks, how many content specific vocabulary terms are my students mastering, and how can I better support their learning of those new words that are really important to them understanding my content. Does that make sense?
It does. And then, so one question that I would have for you then is, so for some of those students who, and this kind of go, and then this kind of builds in or feeds into the case study that I'll do. So I've noticed that for some students, the the worksheet that I assessed with the vocabulary words matched each other, and just that's just because I built the way I built the assessment. But I was wondering, to your point, would it be better than, instead of saying like all students have to do the three same vocabulary words, to then kind of like create like choices where I have like, I don't know, all of those vocabulary words, and then I say like, by the end of the week, I would like everyone to have like 3 to 5 vocabulary words, but it's up to you which 3 to 5 vocabulary words. So that way, if students are having trouble with some, like at least they have choices, so they can get those in. So
Yes.
it's not trying to create like the same standard for everybody, but at least that the standard is that you do some of the vocabulary words, but you just have the choice.
Yes, you can do that is a great way to do differentiation, or you could alter the how. So if you have those lower level students that are struggling, you could assess them with like a direct match. With your upper level students, you could make them write out the word. So you could alter it by allowing them to select what 3 to 5, or you could alter your method of assessment to allow the upper level students to be more challenged while you're supporting those lower level students with like a word bank or something like that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yep. Any other specific questions that you have?
And then yeah, so the very last piece is just the, I guess, the case study. And so I have one particular student who I think he suffers academically, but the reason why he suffers academically is because he has sort of like a poor behavior. And I know I'm recording, but and I apologize for the language, but I think that this kind of just exemplifies how he feels. Is that sometimes he just kind of has like a fuck it attitude, like I just don't care. And I know that, and like, he's on an IEP plan, and so like there's a history of trauma, and he's a really great kid, and he has a really great attitude, but then, like a light switch, it is just like he will go from like, hey, Mr. T, how's it going, have a great day, and then 5 minutes later I'll be like, hey, so this is the worksheet that we're doing today, and he'll just like push it to the side and kind of like, curse under his mouth that like he doesn't want to do it. And sometimes he'll just like leave the classroom without asking for permission. So it's kind of like, so the one thing is, I'd really like to focus on him, and then also I guess just kind of like what, and more specifics later on, but like just kind of like generally what would your feedback be towards like, getting him more engaged. Um, and as you saw, like, for the class, and not just for this class, but for all my programs, I have a ping pong table as a reward system. And so, for instance, like with my auto program, I like to like giving this lesson as an example. We probably wouldn't even get past the word cloud activity, but however, when I told them, I said, if you finish, so we have class from 1:15 to 2:15, and I said, if you can finish the worksheet by 2 o'clock, I will let you have 15 minutes of ping pong time. And they finished it by 1:45. So I'd never seen them work so hard in their lives. and then they had about a half hour of fun activity time. So I'm trying to think of things like that to entice all of my students, but particularly this one, to get more re-engaged, because he's a senior, and I really feel that when he graduates and he doesn't have the access to the support systems that are available to him, I see some maybe potential downward spirals that might exist in his life. And so I want to try to avoid that as much as possible with some of his behavior issues.
Yeah, so it sounds like first I would pick him for your case study. I think you're going to, just because you'll get a lot of feedback. But the most oftentimes when you have students that have experienced trauma or, just struggled academically for a long period of time, they have an IEP, that work avoidance piece comes from repeated failure, right? That I am going to look like I don't care. I'm going to walk out of this classroom because I'm going to take control. I know if I look at this, he might read at a lower level, might process at a slower pace, just really might struggle when looking at something like that. So his defense mechanism is, you know what? I'm going to say F it, because if I do that, I still maintain control. If I walk out of this classroom, I maintain control. So a lot of times it's trying to figure out where that level of need is for the student and modifying to support them so that when they sit in front of whatever it might be, he can experience small pieces of success to then realize, okay, wait a minute, I can do this, which kind of wraps itself back up into the way that we ask students to give us feedback, right? When we alter our methods of formative assessment for students in the room, a lot of times we'll see them be more successful. So maybe worksheet doesn't work for him. Maybe he needs something like a simple Google form where for the other students, they have to fill in. I think you had, I couldn't quite see, but it looked like they had to type and fill in a couple questions. Maybe for him and for, I'm sure, other students, they're working on a Google form, and their Google form is just answer these 4 things where they read it and they select, instead of having that open-ended
Okay.
processing, and if you do it, it sounds like you have Google Classroom. And the really good thing about that is you can assign students different things and nobody even realizes it's happening.
Right. Yeah. So because I had another activity, and for and when I got into the Google Classroom, I said like, oh, this one isn't for you. But what I realized was that that was because I was looking at my Google Classroom and realized that on their end, like they don't see that. So I was like, oh, okay, yeah, like you can isolate certain individuals. So yeah, okay. So and you can do that. So yeah, for assessments as well. Okay, that would be great. I appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Anything. Go
I
right
think
ahead.
I
Okay.
I think that's about it. And
Okay.
yeah,
Awesome.
so great.
So if you need anything else over the next couple weeks, just let me know. If not, I will look for your standard 1, 2, and 3 video to come in whenever we get that. And as long as I really have it by Friday, that's fine. We'll meet that next Sunday. I would send me an email when you send me the submission information, your lesson plan and your link to your video, just put in there a reminder, and we'll see you this Sunday at 9. That'll let me know it still works for you. And then if it works for me, I'll just respond back and say, okay, see you then. That way, if anything pops up for you or me, we kind of have that check-in that we're both still free.
Okay, great. And I really appreciate it. And yeah, I can't imagine, being a principal and then also being a mentor, the kind of stress levels that you're under. So yeah, so I really appreciate that that you take the time. And so I look forward for the next 10 plus weeks. So
All right. Awesome. Have a great week.
thank you. You too. Have a good Sunday and Martin Luther King Day. So see you.
Yes, you as well. Bye.